This evening we'll be picking up on page 30, okay, in the 14th book of Yisrayl, part 2, Sin Never Again. And, that title for this edition of the books of Yisrayl, which is Sin Never Again, has a lot of necessary implications and a lot of inevitable connotations. In order to sin never again, our hearts have to be turned to the Father's, and the Father's hearts have to be turned to the children. And in order to fulfill the law, where Yahweh shows us that we should not forget what the Amorites did unto us when we came out of Egypt, it simply means to make sure that the children are well educated as to the right and proper way to deal with setbacks, the right and proper way to deal with unrealized expectations or expectations that had not been met, their very own expectations, our very own expectations, and also to look toward and into the hope of Yahweh. Okay? Remember, believing into the one whom Yahweh has sent. In other words, that our minds would be like unto his, with that same fervor and zeal that he has used all of these many years in the wilderness to be the one standing in opposition against Babylon. And we have to be those who will also be there to lift up his hands in this opposition against Babylon, and to be in opposition against Babylon in our own minds. But this is how we're going to sin never again. Okay, if we oppose Babylon in our very own minds. So it's up to us to read and to understand and to know the knowledge of Yahweh so that we could take on the characteristics of Yahweh and practice the characteristic traits of a saint who will worship and reverence the holy name of Yahweh in every single aspect. What Pastor wants us to understand in this lesson, okay, this lesson which is in the 4th chapter of the 14th book of Yisrael, part 2, and Pastor shows that the news today for this generation is proving prophecy in your Bible one by one. And we have had conversations and classes concerning the things that we see in the world today. We've seen how the scientists have proven that when the scripture says that if a man couples with a harlot, he becomes one with that harlot, and that when a man and woman are to be joined together and the two will become one, that they've actually found DNA of multiple partners in one woman. You know, the partners that she had experienced, their DNA was actually found in her brain tissue, and the Y chromosome found in her blood, in the bloodstream of the women. Okay, so this is science verifying what Yahweh has already told us. Okay, and it was up to us to believe without the science. And now Yahweh has given us the strength, right, in now being able to see what we have already believed. Okay, so and we're going to see more and more of this. You know, one of the great priests was saying that all roads lead to Abel, and you'll find that in every single way. You'll find that science starts pointing the people in the direction of Abel. One of the priests had sent me an article about the influx of the population of people coming to Abelin. They don't know that they're coming here for the house of Yahweh or to learn of Yahweh. But these are people by the tens of thousands moving here from California and moving here from Florida and other places in the U.S. Okay, because we're going to find that the only place that's going to be able to stand up against what's coming, and when I say stand up against, I don't mean to war against or, to go head to head or, not that type of stand, but stand in the sense of stability, natural resources, rain in its season, all of these things. The only place that's going to meet that need is you're going to find that it's going to be here. The only place that's going to meet the spiritual criteria also is going to be here. And by those aspects by themselves, you're going to see people being funneled to Abel. Okay, they might feel as though they're coming here because, where I am right now, it's drought, like severe drought and dry, but yet at Abel or in Abelin or in Texas, there's a nice amount of rain. Let's go ahead and move over there. Okay, so these, because the microbes are gonna. What did Yahweh say in Deuteronomy 30? He said, "I set before you this day these laws that will bring you life." Okay, life by righteousness or death by destruction. And he set heaven and earth to testify against us this day. And so what that's implying is that the very firmament itself will testify to the fact that these ones have stood for Yahweh. And though they had a little strength, they did not deny the name of Yahweh. Okay, so they shall receive the rain. We'll see these things. Yahweh's going to put, it's going to be very plain and simple. And we will rejoice in the fact that we believed before we saw. We'll definitely rejoice in these things. So some things to keep in mind, because it's going to take a large amount of patience, endurance, and understanding for us to fulfill our commission in these last days, which is to usher in the kingdom of Yahweh. But this is part of it, that you remember Pastor showing us that the Supreme Court is not actually all that supreme. Okay? They're a court that was set in place by this Nimrod system, and this Constantine Constitution is what has set these individuals who are supreme, supposedly supreme, in office. But what Pastor shows here is, like he says, the supreme teachers, the supreme courts, and the supreme judges are false prophets. Okay? They are false prophets. These individuals that make gain off of unholiness as opposed to bringing forth the blessings that come through holiness and righteousness. Also keep in mind that it's evil that causes the rain to come down in buckets instead of sprinkles, and scientists know this. Okay? So it is that evil, that confusion that causes this rain to flood out people, and their houses are destroyed, and their vehicles are destroyed, caught under feet of water, and people are dying in their vehicles. It's because of what Isaiah 24 says to us. The inhabitants of the earth have caused this to be so, the confusion in the world. Okay, and in the firmament. We have done this. Mankind has done this. And so guess what? Mankind has to correct it. And that's Yahweh's plan for the sons of man. Our firmament is screwed up by STDs, and we created and sent into the atmosphere. Also keep in mind that these popes are evil like the gods. Okay, they put on a presentation to be a white horse or to be a lamb, but inwardly they're ravenous wolves, as Yahweh showed us that Benjamin was in Genesis 49. Okay, these individuals are ravenous, and they don't have the cares and the concerns of the people. And even in their pursuit of peace, they'll cause much destruction. The religious leaders that are guiding the world are being led by Pope Francis right now. All of them. Every single one of the religious leaders. And there's evidence to show it also. Okay? Also, therefore, it says, there are 41 wars that are raging in the world today. And we've never been in the battlefield. We've never been, well, some of us haven't. There are some who have. And to be able to see the ravages of war and see the helplessness that war brings, the confusion of that war, is something that we really have to allow ourselves to really understand in order to help to catapult us or to help to solidify us in our positions as members of the House of Yahweh. Okay? Members who are willing to study to show ourselves approved, workmen who do not need to be ashamed, but will bring forth the name of our Heavenly Father. Okay? So, Pastor says here, he says, Shalom, everyone, and joyful cheers and praise to Yahweh. He says, man, we got a big crowd. Wow. Oh, it's beautiful, beautiful. Praise Yahweh. You may be seated. I love you too. May Yahweh bless each and every one of you, and may the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. This has started out with a wonderful day, full of problems that we rejoiced through as we were solving them. Okay, full of problems that we rejoiced through as we were solving them. Keep in mind, Yahweh is not a man that he should repent. Okay? And Yahweh told us already that his thoughts are not our thoughts. So the way that sometimes we seek to resolve issues, a lot of the times is not the way that Yahweh would. Nonetheless, we're working through these things. We're becoming in the image and likeness of Yahweh. And you can see that plainly. You look into the prophecies and you see what Yahweh has done in fulfilling the establishment of his holy house and all of the aspects of it that surround that establishment. Okay, the birth of the two witnesses, brothers from the same womb, the name of one of them being called from that same womb by a third party. Okay, as Yahweh showed plainly and simply. The changing of the names of both individuals and the circumstances that surround both of those instances. What they'll teach. What they'll teach, what their focus will be. That one of them will be alive to be a minister of peace. All of these things are fulfillment of these prophecies and should give us that strength. It doesn't mean that we won't go through hardships and we won't go through often at times emotional upheavals. But we do have to keep Yahweh in our minds, at forefront in our minds, always crying out to Yahweh, begging for Father Yahweh to guide and direct his people, to inspire us into doing what is pleasing before him above all. Because if you please Yahweh, you're going to please man. But if you seek to please man, you just might miss Yahweh. Okay? Now, don't get me wrong. We have to please each other. But the way to please your brother is by pleasing Yahweh first. Okay? So learning how to reverence Yahweh is paramount in building this holy house of Yahweh. He said, Pastor said, when I first got my bread, we came out of Egypt like in the time of Moshe, but our world is much more evil, like in Noah's day. Okay, now, in Noah's day, they didn't have the modes of communication that we have, and that's what makes this time period right now like no other. It overshadows everything else, every other time period that has been on the face of the planet. Okay, this time period overshadows it. Why? Because of the computer. Pastor showed us that the way that the U.S. became the chief of all nations was through the computer. Did it through the computer. Because it's that computer that helped them to figure out their military might, to calculate their nuclear weaponry, to be able to pinpoint where their enemy is and send a missile right through the enemy's window. Okay, and no other nation, no other beast of the field has been as wise and subtle as the U.S. Because you have a lot of humanitarian work that the U.S. is doing. But at the same time, they also seek for that financial gain, okay? The black gold, okay, the oil. But if we'll go over to page 31 in verse 8, we see what Pastor shows here. Actually, let's go to, let's start in verse 7. It says, but anyway, he said, there was a huge drop of water, looking like a drop of, okay, so he's explaining the cloud, okay? Go a little bit further down in that same paragraph. He said, and he looked up the numbers of the pictures, and he took in Strong's concordance. And the numbers of the pictures meant pure, praise Yahweh, pure as fine gold. And if you remember, purple is per pure. Okay, per pure. That's what purple is. Beautiful. You're a beautiful sight to Yahweh right now. The news articles you really need to get this article and read it because of the actor Robin Williams' death and the suffering he went through because of false prophets. As the scriptures calls them, saying war is okay, saying teaching our children sodomy in the schools is okay, that's fine. And their supreme teachers, supreme courts, and supreme judges. Oh yeah, marijuana is okay. You know, drugs are okay. Yeah, they'll bring a lot of money. They'll bring in a lot of money. And that's what this system wants, is filthy lucre. Anytime you see a state or even a country legalizing marijuana, you have to know that it's for the financial gain. It's not for the benefit of the people. It's not to strengthen and bring up their health levels and cause them to leap and abound and go forward in true peace and understanding with marijuana on their mind. That's not what it's for. It's to bring in, they legalize the green leaf to bring in the green paper. Okay? That's what it's for. It's not for our benefit. Although they might tell you, as soon as they started wanting to bring in marijuana and legalize it and make it look like it's all fine and dandy, then all of a sudden you hear about the cannabinoid receptors that's in the brain. That human beings have cannabinoid receptors in the brain that are specifically fashioned and made to accept marijuana into the brain. But we never knew about this before. But when you saw that you wanted to make money off of marijuana, now all of a sudden there's cannabinoid receptors. And there's science backing it up and everything. So these are those false prophets that Pastor was just talking about. Okay, these supreme scientists that are expertly trained in covetous practices. Verse 9. But none of them had the guts enough to stand up and warn the man or teach the man when he was a child. No one had guts enough to tell him this stuff was going to bring you trouble. Marijuana will start you on a track that other drugs can, start you on a track to other drugs because soon it will lose its power. So you'll want to go to higher drugs than that, stronger drugs and stronger drugs, until it will kill you, and dying you will die. Okay? They're gutless. They know scriptures, yes. They're fully acquainted with the scriptures, but it says, but they haven't got guts enough to stand up and tell the people, you're sinning. Okay, so yes, they're fully acquainted with the scriptures, but they won't show the people that it's the sin that's causing them the sorrow and the suffering that they're enduring, okay, that they have to go through. And at the hands of many physicians, they suffer all of these things. Okay, let's go over to verse 28, where it shows plainly, okay, here, remember in Isaiah 24, showing about the condition of man and how man has corrupted the earth, okay? Verse 28, it says, well, this is what you've got our firmament doing. Our firmament is so screwed up by STDs that we have created and sent into the atmosphere due to the leadership of the Pope and the Vatican. Vatican's approval of Iraq strikes a rare exception to peace policy. You see, the true way of peace is there's no compromise for it. You know, we won't say as teachers of peace that, well, yeah, you got to teach peace and you should be keeping peace, but man, that guy stepped on your toes, so maybe it just might be okay for you to just this one time, okay? Just this one time, and then come back and say your Hail Marys. Make sure you say your Hail Marys and do your rosary, and then, you know, and if you pay enough money, when you die, you won't go to purgatory. You'll go straight to those pearly gates, all right? And this is what the Vatican is teaching right here. It's showing that it's okay to war. The Vatican's approval of Iraqi strikes, a strike with bombs, fearing a genocide. This is their excuse now, fearing a genocide of Christians. The Vatican has given its approval to the U.S. military airstrike in Iraq, a rare exception to the policy of peace conflict resolutions. Okay? So it's a rare exception. The military actions might be necessary, he said. Necessary, his spokesman, Silvano Timasi, said. Warnings from the church leaders in Iraq that the persecution is becoming a genocide, with urgent help needed to protect Christians and Yazidis in the North Country, where tens of thousands, he said, have been forced to flee for their lives. We've gotten a short clip here, and I want you to play it right now at this time. Okay, and in that clip, it goes into showing all the different situations that are going on in Iraq with the defense security, Chuck Hagel speaking and letting the people know that, that they're going to go into this war and that they have the backing of the Vatican. The Vatican owns or is the propaganda machine. So anything that you see on the mainstream news, the Vatican is very aware of it. Okay, so that came out of the New York Times. In verse 33, it says, that's the emergency. That's the emergency that he brought out, that all of these were going to get killed. So we really need to get to bombing these people and get to killing these people, because we got a genocide on our hands. So kill the ones who are doing the genocide by genocide. Okay, because we do know that it's not just peace-seeking missions that the U.S. is embarking on. This is a religious war. Okay, and the authorities have said exactly that. Okay, this is a religious war. If you'll go over to page 36, and we'll start on in verse 47. Okay, it says, there are 41 wars raging in the world. Is he only aware of one? Speaking of the Pope, is he only aware of that one that he gave the okay to go and bomb? You know, there's 41 other ones. What occurred to the other 40? They're not as important, or what's the situation? You know? So it says here, is he only aware of one? Is that all the man knows about? I don't think he could be that stupid. It says, I think he knows that these wars are taking place. I think he is behind these wars that are taking place. Yahweh shows that he is in Revelations, as we'll see here in just a moment. Well, here's the drought in California. As goes California. Remember the saying, as goes California, so goes the world. That's been an old saying that I heard when I was a child. I don't know how long it was before that it was invented. California is sinking 1 foot per year, okay, from groundwater depletion. So the taking of the groundwater is causing the instability in the very foundation. You know, there's everybody knows what PTSD is, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. And there's a specific type of post-traumatic stress disorder that affects people who have survived earthquakes. And what they were finding was, for every man, woman, and child, the earth is supposed to be a firm foundation. Everything gets tied to the earth. But once the earth starts shaking, then it causes a type of disturbance in the mind that says, man, my only foundation is not firm. And so it causes a post-traumatic stress disorder. And if you know about post-traumatic stress disorder, you know how grievous people suffer from these things. Okay? But Yahweh has given us the way to peace, the way to continue and to forge forward in righteousness. And it doesn't come from the 7 hills of Rome. It comes from the place where Yahweh chose to place his name, the mountain at Abel. And if you'd all please stand, I'd like to present to you the great Kahan Michael Hawkins.
Shalom, please be seated. Yeah, the earth plays a very important part in the lives of everyone, because we are placed on this earth. You know, this is our home planet, and that's why Yahweh stresses so much to take care of it, like we should. Let's jump over here to, you see where God was just covering about, look at verse 49 real quick, that California was sinking 1 foot each year from underground groundwater depletion. So they've sucked it all up, you know, and now, of course, they've gotten some of the water back, and it's just, you know, they're just on cloud 9 thinking that everything is going to be hunky-dory with them, you know. It's the same as the people around here, you know, with all the lakes filling up and so forth. But, you know, that's just a deception, because the drought is still going on. And those are just things that make them forget about the fact of what they have gone through already. You know, it's going to catch them off guard. And remember, like it says, that Yeshua will return like a thief in the night. You know, it's going to catch people off guard. They're just not going to realize these things. So he continues on here about this article here. And then jump over to verse 58. Because here, well, look at verse 56. In Isaiah 24:4, he says, the earth mourns and fades away. The world mourns and fades away, and the hardy people of the earth languish. And then, of course, it says, the earth will reel to and fro like a drunkard and sway like a hut. And, of course, he's talking about that hut there. You know, a sway means how it sags down, and he compares California to that, of what's going on there. In verse 58, he says, mourning. You know, all the earth will be mourning. And even at the time when, remember what it says, the tribes will be mourning at the time of Yeshua returns, because of all the things that they see going on. And then remember, it talks about in Revelation that the fact that when the merchants see all these things, they're really going to be groaning about these things. Well, verse 58, morning, and then let's see the cause here is in Isaiah 25, verse 4, the earth also is defiled under the inhabitants of it, notice. He says it's defiled now. He said, now you don't defile the earth with burning wood or coal, you know. You don't defile the earth by burning wood. And if you remember, now in California there was I think they had passed a law years ago about that you couldn't use wood-burning stoves because of that. Or either that or they were taxing people or something for using them and stuff. But, you know, they always think about those things. But remember, the earth it's not the burning of wood or coal. You remember, after the flood in Genesis 8, verse 20, it says, Noah built an altar to Yahweh and took of every clean animal and of every clean bird and offer a burnt offering on the altar. Now, this was right after the flood. Now, I don't think Yahweh was so upset, but maybe, you know, in the environmentalist mind, maybe they're thinking that Noah was so afraid of the Creator because he had just flooded all the earth, you know, that maybe he decided to go green and use solar power for the altar instead of using wood and burning wood, you know. But he built an altar and he burnt wood. So, you know, he did leave a carbon footprint, didn't he? So they need to think about that, a carbon print. So, you know, if the environmentalists would just think about these things, they'd see the craziness of it. You know, it wasn't, he didn't, you know, it says he took an offering of every clean animal and of every clean bird. So we know it wasn't, he wasn't frying some chicken extra crispy and it burnt, or he burnt a grilled steak or whatever, you know. It was wood that he used. And then in Leviticus, you see where the high priest was to take the censer with burning coals and use it. So these things are written in Yahweh's law. So why don't the environmentalists go to the source of all knowledge and see these things and believe Yahweh for what he says? And they wouldn't fall victim to these stupid things that they talk about, such as burning wood or coal and, you know, all of these things. Do certain things pollute the air? Sure they do. But the earth would take care of those things. You know, like all these cities and so forth. It's not the smog in California that's causing the problems, and it's not the smog in China that causes the problem. It's the sin that's causing the smog not to be taken care of. The earth could cleanse itself with that, and could cleanse itself up to where it would be pure, clean air if the people would stop their sinning. But they don't. And so, therefore, they suffer the results of their sin. You know, these cities are full of evil, and that's why they suffer so much. So he says, this doesn't defile the earth. The Scripture shows what does defile the earth and what defiles mankind. He says, the same things that defile mankind, and more scientists are now saying this, and I'm glad, he says, but they're saying also the same things that we're seeing in the sea life and in the atmosphere, floating in the atmosphere, that we're actually breathing. You know, we actually breathe this stuff in. And, you know, you can see that and you can tell that. I mean, anybody can. Anybody who goes to a place where there is a cooking establishment, you smell it cooking in the air. You smell it, you know. Well, you're breathing it in, you know. And so if it's cooked that they're barbecuing, I mean pork that they're barbecuing right there, it's going into your system, you know. You're smelling these things, and it's actually going into you and defiling you. And that's what we have to put up with, you know. You can't escape these things. So the earth is also defiled, notice, under the inhabitants of it. And that word under, it actually means under. It means literally under their feet, underneath their feet. And it also means, of course, under them, being under subjection of the inhabitants, because that's the cause of the problems, you know, is the people themselves. So he says, verse 6, because of this, the curse is sinking like a hut, sinking for a foot a year. And it has devoured the earth, and those who dwell therein are desolate. Therefore, the inhabitants of the earth are burned. They're desolate. They don't know what to do. And they don't have any way to solve their problems. They have no idea. Therefore, the inhabitants of the earth are burned, or they will be burned, and few men left. And remember, Yahweh speaks as though things are already done. So when he says these things, he's talking about future. And that's what, of course, prophecy is. It always talks about the future, but it comes to pass. And then, of course, then it becomes present, and then, of course, it becomes what occurs in the past. It becomes fulfilled prophecy. But that's one thing that you can believe, and what Yahweh speaks about in prophecy itself. So verse 61 here, he says, now the transgression of the law. That's 1 Yahweh 3, verse 4, 7, and 8, and 10. He says, but I want you to go to Revelation 8:10, because Yahweh tells us here, he shows us first the Vatican in chapter 17. It sits on the 7 hills. No one can deny that. And no one can deny that the Vatican is the one that sits on these 7 hills, the 7 hills of Rome. There's so much information. You can look it up in encyclopedias, dictionaries, all of these things tell you about this. It's very clear. And jump down to verse 63. So it says here, Yahweh says now in Revelation 17, verse 18, and the woman whom you saw, this abomination of desolation that brings forth the abominations, the filthiness, that is the defilement of the earth, and the filthiness of her fornications, and that is God worship, worshiping gods, that lifestyle that they follow, and following the evil of the gods in Genesis 3, verse 5. If it's not following Yahweh, you're following evil. That's all there is to it. There's nothing but evil in this world. And of course, they're the ones that are responsible for the blood of the saints and the blood of the prophets. And he makes mention of Fox's Book of Martyrs, which Fox did a lot of research there and brought out the information of all the deaths of the different disciples. In verse 66, he says, well, this woman that you see there of God worshipers, in verse 3 it says, so he carried me away in the spirit into the midst of God worshipers. They were evil like the gods. That's what the people are, because anywhere people worship God, they're worshiping evil. But they're too blind to see these things. Their minds are just totally corrupt. The gods have them in such deception that they eat the foods that confuse their minds so they can't think straight. So since they can't think straight, they become more and more involved into the deception that is there. And before you know it, they're totally consumed in these things, but they have no idea what they're even doing. Remember, Satan had blinded the minds of the people. She's very subtle. She's very crafty in the way she does those things, too. But they weren't like Yahweh. Yahweh said, remember, be in my likeness and be perfect. Yeshua said that too. Remember, become perfect just as your Father in heaven is perfect. And the Psalms said that the laws of Yahweh are perfect. So you can't improve on it. There's no way that you can change perfection. Being perfect is being perfect. It's fine just the way it is. You don't need to add to it nor take away from it. And that's why Yahweh warns us. In fact, he says the curse will come upon those who add to or take away from, because it's already got everything that you need right there. You don't need to add to it nor take away from it. You can't improve perfection. But these will make mankind wise. Remember the simple. The scripture says it makes the simple ones wise, right? And that's what we want to become, is wise people. Have the wisdom of Yahweh. And if you have wisdom, he says, this. You'll understand it that in the last days, and Daniel says, you will be teachers of it. You'll be able to teach this, and you'll be able to teach why the world is going downhill. Because they themselves don't understand it. They don't know. They can't comprehend what they've done wrong and how in the world anything that they've done has affected them or affects someone else. And remember, sin doesn't just affect us. It affects everyone around us. And just like, there's a saying that your health matters not just to you, but it affects everybody around you. Everything that you do and everyone that you know. And so when these people are sick and their minds are sick because they eat the unclean foods, it affects them. It affects what they think, but it affects the other person too. But only the house of Yahweh knows that and understands that when, it's like when someone is joyful and they go around other people, they can lift those people up because they have, how to say it, it's got, how they talk about like an aura and so forth, but it's like this, the wisdom of Yahweh and the joy of living, like can proceed forth from you and lift someone else up, and strengthen them. And that's what the Scripture says. When it's down, lift them up, and so forth. And so we can do that in ways in which we don't comprehend. We don't understand exactly how the mind works and so forth. But right now, as you're sitting here, you're absorbing so much stuff that's being said to you and being picked up with your subconscious mind that you can't even comprehend it. You don't even realize the things that are being spoken to you. You don't even realize the things that your mind is being understanding by just glancing down at the page. You've just taken in all of that page within your mind within a nanosecond. You don't even realize it. That you could repeat every word that's on that page. That's the power of the subconscious mind. So when we're around one another and we act as Yahweh to one another, we're building one another up. And that's all part of building up the house of Yahweh in ways that we can't even comprehend, the way that Yahweh has created us and all the things that go on around us, And so that's why it talks about so much about atmosphere, and our environment is so important to us, because it's just so incredible. I mean, it's even known facts such as like when a woman has a child and she feeds her child, breastfeeds her child, even all of her emotions and everything else is going into that child through the milk, And it's like it should be a time, that it said like you shouldn't be talking on the phone or watching TV and doing these things, whatever, because it's going to affect the way that the child is being fed, And some of the mother's milk can even become like poison to a baby, to where they will, after a minute, they'll stop. And then, the mother complains, well, always wants to feed them up 24 hours a day. Well, it's because of the lifestyle that they're living, that they're affecting the child, that they don't even comprehend what they're actually doing to that child. So he says here, it's not from burning coal, okay? It's not from burning fossil fuel. It said that died millions of years ago. I always used to think about that fossil fuel, how stupid that is, man. You bury something and then all of a sudden it dissolves into oil. Just never made sense. He says, no, that's a lie. Now, the man lost his job. He was talking about this scientist who found this soft tissue in dinosaurs, and he said that he claimed that it was 4,000 years old. And like Pastor said, well, 4,000 years ago, that's quite a difference than in millions of years ago. Well, because the 4,000 years is closer to the 6,000 years of the Earth's history and so forth, So he wasn't saying here that dinosaurs were around 4,000 years ago. Maybe in this man's mind he was, but that's not what Yahweh says. The Earth is 6,000 years old. But the fact is that it showed that this dinosaur bone. What it was is it found the soft tissue, which they always say that over millions of years, all this stuff would be consumed and there'd be nothing left but dry bone and so forth. But they actually found soft tissue. And so when he said it's only thousands of years old instead of millions of years old, they fired him. They got rid of him. And of course he sued, and I don't know whether he won the case or not, but he sued because of the fact that, like his lawyer said, you can't fire someone because of their religious belief, But, a lot of people jumped on this to show that, hey, it's only if it's thousands of years old, it makes more sense, especially if you find, there was another woman too who had found some soft tissue and stuff, and she actually had the tissue examined, she studied under microscopes and stuff and even seen the blood cells and stuff in it, So they know that it's a lie, that it can be millions of years old, but if they go to the Scriptures and see what the Scriptures say and they believe what the Scriptures say, they know that the earth is not millions of years old. So the shrinking of California here itself is creating these empty pockets of the earth and is causing the ground actually to sink down. And I remember on the news that he showed a lot of that stuff, and he showed the land how it had actually sunk down. It was really amazing. In verse 70 here, it says, efforts he was reading this article here about California. It says, the efforts to mitigate the problem in some areas are having a minimally positive effect amidst the report, but groundwater levels continue to decline to record low levels in some areas of the valley, and therefore the magnitudes and the rates of land subsidence documented by the study can be expected to continue. So they know that, by pumping out all of the water out of the grounds, it's just forming a big hole in the ground, and eventually that's going to sink. So without water in California, millions will suffer, and food shortages will become the new norm. Food shortages will become the new norm. And he says, your great supermarkets, And what do people think? Well, where does food come from? Well, it comes from the supermarket, right? And that where it comes from? You get hungry, you go to the supermarket, you buy food, And in their mind, that's it. Think of how stupid the young people are. If they, how they used to do the surveys out in the corners of the streets and ask people dumb questions and stuff, and they'd come up with the wackiest, craziest thing. They didn't even know who was president of the United States, at this moment and stuff. If you ask these young children where food comes from, that's what they'd say is a grocery store. You mean Adam and Eve didn't use cell phones? Yahweh didn't call them on the cell phones? Say, Adam, you sinned, buddy. Yo, what's up, Yahweh? But they don't even understand that to them, you go to a supermarket to obtain your items. They don't understand that food comes out of the ground. You have to grow it, And that's the concept, that they think these things have been around all the time. But see, that's the dangers of technology. It screws up a person's mind so much when you become absorbed into it. Look at verse 74. He says, the river is drying up. Why? Well, not because they built the dam. It's not the dam that's holding back the water and keeping the water from drying up. No, it's the lack of water in the right places. The firmament is what you've ruined. The bacteria that do their jobs in the heavens for you. You have already caused a death sentence to these bacteria by your sins. And you remember what Yeshua said in Yonkanan 8:44? He says, you are your teacher, Satan the devil, because from the beginning she was a murderer. She murdered from the very beginning. Well, it's because of following her teachings of the serpent that this very same thing is taking place. And people of this world are responsible for murder. They're murdering the bacteria. They're murdering the firmament. They're destroying what's taking place, the life that is taking place in the firmament. And that's what murder is. It's the taking of life. And that's why when we kill something without permission, without asking Yahweh, and having a valid reason to do it to begin with, you're taking the life of something. It doesn't matter what it is. You're still taking the life of something, and we're responsible for that. Maybe even Yahweh says even when we kill an animal for food, we're held accountable for that blood, right? Accounting is being made for that blood. A record is being made for the blood that's shed for that animal that was killed. So it better be for a right reason and so forth. Well, he says in verse 75, the West is well known for its lack of morals because it's led by Rome. Led by Rome, of course. That's where we get all our morals from in today's society. Verse 79 here, he says, but Yahweh said, and he goes on here and he just gives that example where Yahweh says they ate and they drank and they rose up to play. And that's exactly what the world is doing today. So he likens it because of what we see going on today, because of the results of the firmament being destroyed. They did the same thing with Moshe. They ate, they drank, they rose up to play, and that's what we see the world doing today. And that word play, it means to laugh, outright scorn, to sport, and to mock. They were actually mocking Yahweh's law. They were actually scorning it. They were actually standing up and just made sport of it all. And I'm not sure if I can't remember if the King James says that, or the word means that whenever, with Abraham's wife, with Hagar, the maidservant, and what went on there. But it said that they mocked. They were mocking Yahweh. They were mocking the laws of Yahweh. And that's why finally when Abraham said, listened to Sarah and said, let them go, let them go. So this is what they were doing. They were rising up to play. They weren't taking the seriousness. They didn't set their minds on anything that should have been. They set their minds on playing, on entertainment, instead of studying and overcoming for the kingdom like we should. But Yahweh put man here on earth for that purpose, to study and to overcome for the kingdom. That's the whole reason why we were created, is to become an image and likeness of Yahweh, right? You remember Psalm 8, verse 3 and 4 says, when we consider your heavens, the work that your fingers have framed, the work of the moon and of the stars which you have ordained. What is man? What is man that you're mindful of him? And the Son of Man that you visit him. See that word visit? That word visit means to overcome or to oversee. It means to have charge of or to have care of. And that's why man was put on this earth. Where Yahweh says, why did you create us? You know, that's the age-old thing, is man always thinking like, well, where did I come from, you know? Why was man placed here on earth? Well, to oversee it, to have charge of it. Remember, because it says that the earth is given to the children of men. You know, it's ours to partake of, and we're going to receive it. Remember, in Psalms 34, it says, 37, it says, this is the inheritance of the righteous. You know, we will inherit the kingdom. We will inherit the earth. The earth is given to the children of men for a reason. We'll see why in just a moment. Let's see. Look over to verse 80. It says, but the others, notice, the others, now the wise would realize while they're here on this, but the others ate and drank and they rose up to play. In other words, that means that they forsook the purpose for which they was set here on earth, the whole world. Because what is our purpose? Our purpose is to learn to become like Yahweh, to be as Yahweh is, to oversee all of these things. And because when Yahweh, you know, we're going to be restoring the earth. Yahweh's going to use us to restore the earth. He's going to do it. It's his power, because nothing can be done without Yahweh. But he's going to allow us as training to restore the earth. And so that's the whole purpose of why we were created, is to enjoy life. And Yeshua said, enjoy life more abundantly, right? Verse 81, this is Matthew 24, verse 7. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and pestilences, diseases and earthquakes. And of course, that word earthquake means anything that's unnatural, that has to do with the weather pattern or the earth's pattern, the atmosphere, the firmament, anything unnatural like tornadoes, hurricanes, and so forth, like the 14 inches of rain and so forth. You know, today on the news, they said north of Clyde, yeah, they had received like 9.7 inches of rain last night. That's almost 10 inches of rain, you know. And we received less than that. When was it? Last week, week before that, whenever Clyde was flooded out, you know. Did y'all see that? The flooding that was in Clyde? They showed it on the news, and here was a guy in a little kayak going down a road, you know, and it's like, what in the world? I went there the next day, and all the water had subsided. I had all disappeared, and I thought, I just can't believe that it was that high, because, I mean, you could see half of the kayak was in the water, you know, and the other half was sticking out of us. I mean, that was a lot of water that flowed through there. And that just shows what man's sin's done, you know, how it's messed things up for everybody. And that's why Yahweh tells us it's not just us that sin affects. It affects everybody around us. You know, we're responsible for these things. And that's the bad thing, too, is that when we sin, you know, we have an advocate with the Father. The world doesn't have that advocate, and they're going to suffer full force the brunt of everything. But at least, you know, we can repent and we can come back to Yahweh. But notice verse 91 here, it says, it's all due to the teaching. You know, it's all due to the teaching. As he says, teach the laws to your children when they rise up, when they go to bed, when you walk by the way, train up a child in the way that he would go, and when he is old, he won't depart from it. Because if you did that, then you wouldn't see all the suffering that's going on. But they don't do that, you know. They train up their children in the ways of war and hatred and so forth. That word train means to initiate or discipline. Well, they certainly don't discipline their children, you know. Little Johnny can run all over the store, and the mother can be shouting at the top of her lungs, but little Johnny never stops doing what he wants to do, you know. It means to train, to dedicate, and inaugurate. Okay, well, inaugurate means to induct into an office, right? So what are we doing when we're training up our children? We're training them to take an office, okay? And that office is going to be what's going to be given to all mankind, is to inherit the earth, you know, and to bring the earth back into its original condition, and then eventually the whole universe. But we're training them now to induct them into the office that Yahweh has in store for them right there. That's our job. We've got to prepare the children to obtain their offices in the soon coming kingdom of Yahweh. Verse 94 here says, now if you go over to Revelation 6, you'll see the same one that brought the abominations that make desolate. And in Leviticus 18, Deuteronomy 14, and Leviticus 11 talks about all the abominations that the people eat and how it defiles their bodies and so forth. But notice he says that's not going to be allowed in the new world. And if you don't stand up for these laws, well, we can assure that Yahweh, and we can assure Yahweh that there will be sin never again, then we simply won't have a part in that great kingdom. And we'll bring the proper rainfalls. We'll bring a stop to the wars. We'll bring a stop to sickness and death. But it's all an opportunity that's given to us. It's given to you now. Remember Psalm 115, verse 16, where it says, the heaven of heavens belong to Yahweh, but the earth has he given to the children of man. Right? He's given that. Well, that word given, it actually means to appoint or to assign. It means to be healed. These are all things, we're going to be appointed offices, but those offices will be used to restore the earth back to its original condition. It means to grant, to occupy, to ordained, and send out. You're going to be sent out to teach the nations, to teach the universe eventually. And then the New Strong's says the word give means to give something into someone's hand, to commit it to his care. And this phrase is used to express the transfer of political power, such as the divine right to rule. Well, that's what we're going to do. We will rule as Yahweh rules, right? That's what an Israelite is, one who will rule as Yahweh rules. And that's the whole purpose why Yahweh has created man and put man on this earth, so he can learn these things, and he can teach it to his children, so his children can be equipped to be able to receive their offices, because age is not going to matter. It's what's in the mind that matters, and that's what Yahweh looks upon. And that's the way that Yahweh will judge these things. And he shows us that examples in the scriptures of how he used younger people, and we see the example now how the prophet Yael's prophecies is coming to pass. So don't feel left out, because remember, the dreams and the visions haven't come yet, right? Those are going to come too. Just as you see the young people teaching today, the dreams and the visions will also come. But all of these things will be used. But we've got to get ready for Yahweh. We've got to be in the right, prepare our hearts and our minds so that we can be used in that manner. And all these things were not to be given glory to anyone, but the glory will go to Yahweh. And it will be for the teaching and the promoting of the work that these things will take place to begin with. Because we are a body, and we are the body of Messiah. You go to verse 108, he says, if you think about that now, Satan in Genesis chapter 3, along with the gods, where it says you will be like the gods, knowing evil. And then it talks about wearing the crown and the white horse. Remember, Revelation speaks about that, to deceive the people. Well, Satan was a deceiver from the beginning, and Yeshua said she was a murderer from the beginning, meaning she led Cain to committing murder. And Cain committed murder, but she was charged with it. She's the one that led him to do it. So, when the time comes, Satan knows what she's doing. She knows. Mankind doesn't always know. Mankind is blinded right now. Mankind doesn't understand what the gods do. They don't understand who the gods are. And if they did, then they certainly wouldn't be following the gods. But their minds are blinded at this time. So the one who knows, Satan knows, and she knows what to do. And she led him and she deceived Cain, and she's the one who's going to be responsible for leading these people into the deception that they're in. And she's going to be judged for that. We're going to see her sentence come to pass. Remember, she's judged. Okay? The judgment will be set through the courts of heaven. But remember, Yahweh says in Revelation, you will see the sentence of a great whore, right? You will see the sentence of all these Vatican and everything else coming down and being destroyed when the saints of Yahweh will be given the keys to the kingdom, and we'll have our place in Yahweh's kingdom and cleanse this earth up and bring it back to where the state that Yahweh originally put mankind in to begin with. May Yahweh bless your understanding.